if I can run my gimbal once again. In the back behind me off the coast here, you can see there is a, let me see how I'm standing here, right there. Over my shoulder here, there is a sunken ship. And this sunken ship is one of the few concrete ships that was ever used here in America. I think one of 12. And I want to tell you the story about it and explain why it's here and why I've even come to this spot in just a moment. But before I do, I want to speak about the fact that if you want to create wealth, if you want to get rich, if you want to build wealth, if you want to do all these things, you need to think very differently about money. And the people that have created wealth and become rich are people that think about money, they talk about money, they do things that the average person doesn't do. And I'm trying to stay out of the wind, so I've got my back to the wind. Hopefully it's not too bad here. I'm at Sunset Beach in Cape May, New Jersey. The sun just went down, so hopefully the light isn't too bad here. And my challenge today is to think about what it takes to build wealth. This boat makes me think about the fact that when it comes to anything in life, we all are going to sink or swim. Part of the learning process is learning to navigate the storms of life, learning the game of life. I hated money for years and was so frustrated and annoyed because it seemed beyond my reach. But when I decided to learn the game of money and learn the rules of the game, it began to really change. And one person that really influenced a lot of that at the beginning was a guy named Robert Kiyosaki. And he one time shared this, he shares this quadrant that he kind of developed, a framework, if you imagine 4 different zones in a quadrant. And he spoke about how most people, like 99% of the world, is in the employee mindset. They're in the employee quadrant. There's a small percentage that, maybe 1% are in the self-employed or small business. I guess he later grouped it as a small business owner. And then you start getting down into like the 0.01% or something are big business owners and investors. Hold on a sec, my fingers are getting cold. I went live before I could get my microphone switched. I love live videos. Everything is crazy and new and an adventure. Anyway, he really spoke about the fact that these businesses were that it's really hard to get wealthy if you are an employee. It's really hard to build wealth if you are an employee. And what really struck me as I read some of his stuff years and years ago, when I was starting to dig into business and entrepreneurship and try and figure out the game of money, it began to really resonate deeply because everything I'd studied in the Bible, it lined up with what he said. And one of the things that always has struck me is that in the Bible, it talks about how you want to be, God has anointed us. God has, his desire is for us to be the head and not the tail. And when I read Robert Kiyosaki's words, it really stood out to me because I realized when you're the employee, you're part of the tail. You just go where the head tells you. You just get in line. You show up when you're told to show up. You told when you can have vacation. I mean, there's some great companies to work for and some better bosses than others. But generally speaking, if you're an employee, you don't get a lot of choices. But if you can become the owner, if you can become the boss, things begin to change. And that's where you can start to build wealth. And so I determined at that point that I wanted to be the head and not the tail in whatever I was doing in life and in business. And so my husband and I jumped into it. I had about 12 business ventures before I met him. Most of them were miserable failures. I'd had a couple great successes. But when I met him, we basically built 3 businesses from the ground up and worked on that. And in our case, it was very much the theme of this video of sink or swim. And when you launch into business, you don't have to do it like we did. But we really were so committed to the process. Neither of us were working for anyone at the time. And we just determined that we didn't want any retreat. We didn't want to go back and work for anyone else. And so even if we had to live in our vehicle, we were committed to being business owners and building businesses. And so in our case, it was totally sink or swim. And of course, you've heard the statistics. Something like 90% of businesses fail in the first 5 years. And so it truly can be a roller coaster. And a lot of people will sink just like this, wherever that ship is behind me. There it is. It's a game of choose your own adventure right now, trying to find what's behind me because I'm not very good with running equipment. There it is. So you don't have to do it like we did. There's a couple other ways if you want to launch into entrepreneurship. There are, I'm just showing you everything around me is what I'm doing right now because I don't know what I'm doing, but this is me live figuring all this out. Anyway, the fact is you don't have to launch in with such a risk element or with such an element, an adventure mindset. There's a lot of people that just do side hustles. They do a side hustle and they build their side hustle until it's profitable enough that they can make the leap. There's others that build and build and build and have a serious plan and they get investors, and when they make the leap, they've got it all figured out and they take that leap and they do it with everything in them. And so there's, you don't have to do the sink or swim method. You don't, like we did, but I challenge you, if you want to get wealthy, if you want to build wealth, if you want to create a better life and have better opportunities than you have right now, then looking for ways to looking for opportunities. You got to be the head and not the tail. You can't be the person, you can't be an employee and really create any wealth. It's almost impossible. And so my challenge today is to look at this boat behind me. Again, my arms are getting tired holding this. If you look at this boat behind me, it's a concrete ship. And this concrete ship is right there. You don't even need to see me. So, the concrete ship, the deal is that this ship was one of 12 built in the First World War. And it was made because they had run out of steel. It was at the end of the war. There weren't a lot of options. And somebody figured out you can build a concrete ship. The challenge is it takes so much concrete that it's so inefficient to sail it. It's actually viable. You can sail it, but it takes so much power and energy to push that thing across the ocean and haul stuff that it wasn't economical. And so when the war ended, they decided to retire these ships. Then later, I think during the Second World War, they had the same thing happen again. They were running out of metal. The war had drug on so long, and at the end of the war, they built another bunch of concrete ships. There were something like 24 concrete ships built. But again, they found the same thing. They're just not economical to power and transport things. And so this ship was brought here to Cape May years ago. Somebody had the plan to build a wharf or a place to dock the ferry that goes from here to from Cape May to Lewes, Delaware. And ultimately their plan kind of failed because it got displaced off the moorings when there was a big storm ages and ages ago. I think it's Sunken like 1926. This was, I think, from the First World War, one of the boats. So this thing has been here almost 100 years. And it's become an iconic part of the Jersey shoreline here at Sunset Beach. And the remnants of it, it's just falling apart, and depends on what the tide is. It looks kind of high right now, but you can see different amounts of the boat depending on it. And so I just really thought it would be a great visual and a fitting metaphor for the fact that, whatever it is, there's great ideas in business, there's bad ideas, there's ones you've sometimes just got to take the risk and try, because if you don't, you're going to always be left wondering. And you can play it safe. You can figure out how to launch into business. And there are different ways to do it. You don't have to do it necessarily like my husband and I did, but it is worth it. And if you want to make an impact, if you want to become more generous than the way you are living right now, become radically generous and make a bigger impact in the world, then then learning to be the head and not the tail is one of the keys that the Bible speaks about, and I have lived out, and I have seen from even veteran individuals who have built major businesses and have tapped into kind of the figuring out, I guess, the game of money. And so that's what I share today. That's my encouragement. I hope that you'll take that leap. I hope you'll learn to build business. I hope that you will find a way to do it no matter where you're at, because if you can, the opportunities to create wealth are endless. And with that, I'm going to sign off. I hope you have a great evening. I'll see you on the next one.